Hello and welcome to the All About You show with OMG and Friends, where we talk about the things that you think about. I am your host, OMG, along with a special studio guest, and she's also the show's clinical psychologist, Dr. Eboni Butler. And we'll get with Dr. Butler in a moment, but in the meantime, family, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We ask that you please join in on the conversation, where your thoughts, your comments, and your opinions help drive the conversation. Today our topic is Get Your Mind Right, a look at mental health awareness. Again, I'm going to now talk to Dr. Eboni Butler, who is the show's psychologist. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Dr. Butler, tell us about you. I know about you, but tell our listening audience about you.
I am a clinical psychologist. I also have a master's degree in counseling, one in clinical psychology. I also have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I'm currently working on a postdoctoral master's.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So you just getting it in school, huh?
Yeah, well, you know,
can never have too much. That's
can
it.
never have enough doors and,
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. So when those chances come, you have to seize the moment. So
I hope y'all take heed of this. This is all good information. I appreciate you coming in on the show today.
No problem.
Okay, now guys, back in 2008, July was designated as Minority Mental Health Awareness Month and was created expressly for the purpose of bringing awareness to the unique struggles that underrepresented groups face in regards to mental illness in this country, as well as how they face dual discrimination. Now, America's mental health policies discriminate systematically against all of the nation's most vulnerable citizens, and that's people with serious mental illness, but they double down on discrimination in minority communities. Now, African American men in psychiatric crisis are less likely to be given psychiatric evaluations for hospitalizations than individuals with similar symptoms who are white, for example, and more likely to be sent to jail. Now, once more, once they arrive in their cells, mentally ill Black inmates and Hispanic inmates are less likely to receive treatment than mentally ill white prisoners. Recently, Psychiatric Services published findings that individuals from minority communities are less likely to also receive adequate follow-up following discharge from a hospital, which we know makes them more likely to be rehospitalized or otherwise trapped in the revolving door or poor outcomes, and including criminalization. The study found low rates of follow-up and even lower rates of adequate treatment following discharge across all racial ethnic groups, and we found that Blacks were significantly less likely than whites to receive any follow-up within 30 days of discharge. Dr. Butler, talk to us about mental illness. I saw some people yesterday, it's all around.
Mm-hmm. It is.
I was going to Third Ward actually, and there were 3 gentlemen there, and they were all they weren't together, but they were closely, in proximity. And they were walking and talking to themselves, and big conversations, and pointing, and he on the phone. What is this?
It is a growing epidemic, and it's influenced by a lot of things.
Okay, namely, tell us. Yeah, this is what we need you here for. Tell us.
A lot of it is influenced by economic status.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is influenced by families that don't want to discuss certain things, and so their anger, emotions are inward, which causes an internal struggle and battle, which can then exacerbate mental illness. And a lot of it is due to drugs. Drugs play a significant part in mental health in a lot of races, but in particular for us.
Yeah, it just seems as though when I read that we get the least amount of services.
Right.
My answer to that was, when is that not the case? We always get.
We always get the bad end.
Yeah, I'm going to say, when is that not the case? So it's no real finding.
No, it's nothing to be surprised about.
Right, there's nothing new.
We are on the bottom of the totem pole in a lot of things. But I think sometimes mental illness is something that we can help one another with.
Good. I'm glad you said that. Now, so what is it that we can do?
We can recognize signs. We can recognize changes in individuals. We can recognize behaviors that a lot of times culturally we tend to ignore. We tend to brush it off. We are past the stage of the uncle hiding in the attic.
I was going to tell you, because I told you, growing up, I had an aunt that was upstairs, and unlike most families at the time, I guess we all had that mental illness. They didn't send them to asylums.
Yeah.
They would send them upstairs, and we couldn't go upstairs.
Yeah.
We just knew Aunt so and so was upstairs.
Right. And we are past the point in our society where we care for one another.
That is true as well, because again, families took care of family.
Correct.
Back then.
Correct.
We didn't have the adoption situation, any of that, because families took care of families.
Mm-hmm.
Now families
doesn't matter. It's a individualistic culture that we have adopted instead of the collective culture that we were brought into.
That's going to hurt us.
Absolutely.
It is now, because I'm just not sure why we don't pull together and keep our families tightly knit. We don't allow that. We bring CPS in our business. Years ago you didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
Family would come and get somebody. The family would have a meeting at the table.
Right.
And it would be at that time decided who would take care of who would do what on what days, and that sort of thing. So yeah, they have quite a few asylums. Do they still call them that?
We call them mental health facilities.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. Okay, because when I was coming up, asylum was the word.
That was the word. No different than it being mentally retarded. Now they're intellectually disabled. Yes. So there's an evolution. I would assume that the evolution means that there will be more awareness and changes, but it's all the same thing.
I was going to say they can change all these names.
Yeah,
when you said that, when we talked about that, it reminds me of that Twix commercial or something where it's got the guy
the
says,
left and the right.
Yes, the left and the right, and I'm the same as if if I were a spirit and you were a ghost. I mean, it's all the same thing, and it needs to be brought out. But a lot of illnesses now, I think, they didn't have the name for it. So now I think I'm realizing, as probably a lot of other people are, is that manic depressant and all of that is now bipolar.
Yes. So
when did they come up with a title? When did they?
It's been evolving, but I would say like over the last 50 years, the titles have evolved.
Last 50?
About the last 50 years
okay.
With the make of the DSM-5 is that we're on now.
What are these acronyms?
Oh, the Diagnostic Manual for Psychiatric.
We don't know that, okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You need to tell us what you're talking about.
The Diagnostic Manual for Psychiatric Disorders. We're in the 5th edition. So we started off in the 1st edition, now we're in the 5th. So over time, we have gathered more information about symptoms. We have gathered information about categories where we're going to place individuals. We've gotten rid of some that no longer fit maybe societal criteria or just how society feels about them. We've integrated some. So now we're in the, I call it the bipolar phase. Everybody's in.
Yeah.
And so.
Or artistic, one or the other now.
Or artistic. That's a whole nother.
I know. Yeah.
because that's a mental illness within itself.
Is it really?
Well, I shouldn't say that. I take that back, world. It is a mental illness in the fact that it limits us and as Black people, because we always are looking for a reason as to why we behave,
why we can't function properly,
how we can't function.
Yeah, that's true.
And so autism, though it is a very much so highly identified and people do suffer from it, there's more people claiming to be autistic than I see actually fit the criteria to be autistic.
But that's the go-to,
That's the go-to, and that's the monetary go-to.
Yes, that's what I mean. It's the go. Yeah, yes, absolutely, and that has a big part.
So that is what fuels that. So everybody wants to be autistic because that is what disability sees in order for you to get this check. So mom has 5 kids. She's young. She doesn't work. She needs the check from disability to help pay bills for all 5 of the kids. The kids are autistic. That is. Well,
when I was coming up, there was no label. It's just like when I became a vegetarian 47 years ago, there was no label. It was just, they thought I was on drugs or I was crazy because I chose to do differently. But it's almost as though when I was coming up, you were just slow. You were touched. You weren't exactly autistic. So now they have all these titles and labels and, medications that they're giving these kids. But again, I just don't know how in a family all 5 children could be autistic, like what you just spoke of. So that's game. That's what that sounds like. That's game.
It is.
Because the likelihood of all 5 children being autistic, and I have a theory about autism, and I can see it as part of a lower or lesser stage of mental illness. I can really see that because it does include learning disabilities. And what else does autism
it has evolved. So you used to have Asperger's syndrome. So Asperger's syndrome were individuals who could cognitively meet the standards, but they were socially delayed.
Okay.
So Asperger's has now been eliminated from the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Disorders and Psychiatric Disorders, to now encompass autism. And so that is, you're on the spectrum. You used to be on the spectrum, whether you were high end or low end, you were on the spectrum. So now it is just inclusive of all. But they're still, in my opinion, and from the work that I've seen, still varying stages of what autism looks like. Because there's some that are severe, there's some that...
what would severe look like? When I think of autism, I just think just not totally there. Like I said, just a little touched, a little slow, a little challenged.
So when we think,
So
when we think of autistic kids now, and it can almost bleed into being MR. So if you think about mentally retarded, which is now intellectually disabled.
I'm gonna say mentally retarded always scared me. Just the name.
Yes.
It just.
But then you had mild, moderate, severe, and profound. And if you think, if you think back to what they looked like, you could tell that somebody was profound. Like they were unable to speak, they were unable to do anything for themselves, whether it's care for themselves, talk. That was the profound stage. They had IQs of 50 or lower. And then you had the mild mental retardation, which people who had cognitive IQs of 70 or lower. Those standards are still in place.
But that criteria is still
the criteria is still there statistically. So when I say, if I was to give a cognitive examination and a person's IQ was below 70, it will automatically qualify them for an intellectual disability disorder. But there's not the specifiers on them anymore. So it's not mild, moderate, or severe. It's all just, this is what it is. And then you all inclusive, and then you differentiate by what is on the service plan.
Okay, Dr. Holm, I think we've got to go to break, and we will be right back.
The Bridge of Light Radio Network, where conversations lead to real change.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I don't know if you remember the old...
Same of our conversations, it's just the two of us.
Oh, okay. I can't think of it, but there used to be a home that was in Harlem Clark off of Fuquay, and it housed individuals who were MR. I can't think of what that was, but they were people who could not live or be by themselves. Now, if you look at people who say they're autistic, these individuals are
functional.
Yeah, okay. So you're just like,
that's why this is game.
Yeah, that's why so the disability world is blowing up, because parents know that it is highly unlikely they're going to deny a child disability services. Now, they can deny an adult.
Yes.
But so what I find in my practice is that I see a lot of kids that are 18 have had this check since they were 5. Can function, do everything, but they are accustomed to still having the check. So when they
that makes them lazy. Number one.
That does. So that's a whole
other thing.
Yes. So
20 seconds.
At 18, they have to recertify. So now they're upset because now
you're healed. So
absolutely,
remarkable.
Absolutely. So then you have more people putting on.
10 seconds.
And we are back. You're listening to the All About You show with Dr. Eboni Butler. She is a clinical psychologist here in Houston as well as in Dallas. She's actually has an office located in this building.
I do.
So we'll get to that information in a moment. But we were talking about mental retardation. And so what were you saying about there being a place out in Harlem? And we were also speaking about how autism is a mild version, if you will, for lack of a better term, of mental illness.
It is. It has varying degrees. So you have some individuals who are autistic and they can still function. Their social capabilities are slightly impaired. They might be on the border of a 70, between a 70 and an 80 when it comes to IQ scores, just enough to kind of qualify them for services. Then you have some that are severely autistic where they can't stand light. If light beams on them, that kind of sends them to an episode. They do repetitive movements. They may knock their head on the wall. They may go back and do certain things or get fixated on something and do it over and over and over again. Those are more of the severe end signs of autism.
Okay, so does autism automatically just manifest itself into full-blown mental retardation, mental health illness? I mean, does it gradually?
When we think of MR, we are only thinking nowadays cognitively, like how a person is able to cognitively function. Do they have rational thinking? Can they do basic information on the IQ? If they were to go out into the world, how would they function? Mm-hmm. When we think about autism, we think about children and how they socially function as well as cognitively function in primarily school settings, because that is where they spend the bulk of their time.
Now, do autistic children grow into autistic adults, or do they manifest again and kind of exponentially turn into from autism to, like I said, full-blown mental illness?
Well, what I think
or can they be, I guess, can they be therapeutically put back to some level of normalcy and be out of the autistic range, and therefore not even getting to be able to go into an adult status of this?
I think once illness. You are properly identified as autistic, that is a diagnosis that stays with you throughout. I think a lot of times people are improperly diagnosed with autism, whether it is behavior problems in school, whether it is changes that need to be made in the learning curve, or how a child processes information that they're not getting at school, so therefore they are labeled as unable to do the information.
Yes. You will. Yeah.
And so because of that, they are given a title, and depend on the mindset of the parents will take the title instead of doing something a little different, whether that is change a child's school, whether that is supplement at home.
I guess work with your child. Right.
But that's easier said than done, I think, when you come from a background of resources. So I think people who don't have resources feel as if there's nothing they can do. The teacher said, the principal said, the diagnostic
That's a whole history of negative connotation being attached to a kid.
But if it provides you some benefit, though short term, whether it is financial stability because of the services you receive, lots of people are going to take that and be okay with it.
Say again, it's about the money.
It is. But we live in a
monetary capitalistic
society. And money is fueled through everything, whether it is your medicine, whether even on the psychiatric side, the medications given to people, the cost of those, how much it is. People prefer the medication versus the therapy. And therapy is going to work. It's going to cause you to work.
Well, therapy causes you to go inside of yourself, and they don't want to do that. They rather just pop a pill. Go to Never Land.
We don't want to do that, yes. and we could say we as if we are this isolated entity, but I'm sure it happens with all cultures. But I can't be concerned about them.
It's minority. It's a minority,
right? But as a African American woman in this culture, I'm concerned about my culture. So I
love my people. I just don't understand them.
Yeah.
I say that all the time.
And so you have to. We African Americans and maybe minorities on other ends too, we got to do the work on the inside, but we don't want to do that. That's going to bring up too much past and history that we have pushed down, swept underneath the rug, don't want to deal with. A lot of people took a lot of secrets to the grave,
That's true.
if you don't know how, or you don't know the origin of it, then how can you fix it?
Now, one of our iconic doctors passed away, of which my husband was one of them, Dr. Joseph Gaff, but Edith Irby Jones. He worked very, very closely with her. And I remember I had a friend whose daughter had gotten a hold of some sort of drug, wet or something. I don't know if it's I call it my year angel dust. When I was in college, it's probably the same thing. Dipped in formaldehyde and all this other stuff. And
it's wet on the street.
Old school. Okay, old school still here. So I helped get her into Edith Irby Jones because Edith knew me. Because she had a waiting list from here to East Texas. And because she knew me, then I got my friend's daughter in there. But hell, within 24 hours or so, she was gone. I mean, it was like they couldn't hold her. When you have people that need help, why are they so quick to release them in their own recognizance or what it is? They're not fully there. Why are you putting them back on the street when? And I went through like just a phone call, but just to be able to get her in there and for her not to stay.
Yeah, why can't you commit somebody to a psych hospital who clearly needs help? Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, you cannot force somebody into admission to a hospital.
Okay, well then what that does, doctor, is leave them out here for us to deal with. They're walking them down the street. They're in front of the corner stores. They're at the.
Absolutely. So you know what happens then?
What?
They wait for them to commit a crime,
and then comes the criminalization
yes,
that I mentioned earlier.
And then they keep them, and then they offer them whatever help that they
but then they treat them just like they said here. You keep them in. Then I read something else about there not being enough beds.
Yes. So I don't know
how
how the criminal justice system is set up. So Texas has two male psychiatric units and one female psychiatric. So how Texas is...
So is that to imply? All right, let me deal with this.
Okay.
This is to imply that men are crazier than we are.
Right.
Well, because you have 2 to 1.
Well, I'm referring. We were talking about the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for the criminal justice system, how it is set up. So all of Texas, for the most part, besides once you get to Lubbock and further west, is controlled by UTMB, University of Texas Medical Branch. They have the contract with Texas Department of Criminal Justice to provide the mental health services. Texas Tech University has everything west of Lubbock.
Okay.
So for our area and most of Texas, which includes Dallas, which includes the Valley, all of that, it is serviced by 2 mental health hospitals for men and 1 for women. So Rusk is for men, and we have Jester out here, which is in Richmond, right outside of the new toll road that they've made. But it is based on beds. So when you have 100 prisons, but you only got 1 facility for psychiatric, and I say 1 facility because depending on where you are housed in the penitentiary determines which psychiatric hospital you can go to, unless you are an intimate threat to yourself. So unless you try to kill yourself and you are having severe signs and all, not even hallucinations, but you have made an actual attempt
at taking your life?
Yes. Mm-hmm. If Jester does not have a bed, then they will send you to Rusk being in the Dallas area. Or closer to the Dallas area. If not, you will just...
And this is only if they're men in this case, because this is...
Jester and...
Rusk.
Yes.
Are the men.
Are the men. Now, there's a female component to... Rusk. And then there is the pregnancy hospital, which is out...
Wait a minute, there's a pregnancy hospital for mental illness? Is that what you
in the criminal justice system. So
Okay.
mothers who are pregnant,
Okay.
they are assigned to this particular facility, which is out here, kind of like in the Seabrook, Texas City area, and they also have psychiatric beds as well.
Why are they not treating these people and allowing them, for lack of a better term, to get pregnant, to go into a facility, having babies while under care of themselves? Is that any influence on the child, the unborn child, because their parent is, a little touched?
Meaning
genetically or hereditary?
well, mental illness is genetic. You know, they've done lots of brain scans to see exactly what a brain of somebody with schizophrenia looks like. You know, the different receptors, whether it's acetylcholine and Alzheimer's, whether it is dopamine and schizophrenia and bipolar, just depending. So there is a genetic component to it, but it is cheaper. And cheaper is not a word. It is more lucrative to keep you housed in the penitentiary.
I was going to say that. I have it here.
Treated and be a productive member into society.
Well, they were saying here when I read my opening was pretty much the fact that they'll put the black men and Hispanic men in jail, and they will get limited services, and so after being there 30 days they'll be released with no follow-up, released with no contact after they've left the facility. But this is not the case for white people. So they're saying that it's a dual discrimination, and I guess that meaning being black and being mentally ill. That's a hell of a situation.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Are men, I read somewhere that at least young men now are a threat as far as mental illness as it relates to suicide.
Yes.
What's happening with our young black men?
Societal pressure. I think.
Hell, they can't go off just because of societal pressure. You have it. I have it. We cope.
But I think as women, we are raised to cope. We are raised to deal with it. If for those that grew up in single parent households where mom was doing it, she handled it. So we see the example of what strength looks like.
Okay.
I think a lot of our young men do not see that example because dad is penitentiary, dad is gone someplace else. They don't see what that
society did this though.
True enough, they did.
Yeah, this was all by design.
All by design.
I have some information here that 8.3 million adults with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, mental illness, and that's 3.3% of the population. And this is with treatment. These are some of the treatment rates. And then they said 5.5 million, approximate number, with severe bipolar disorder, which is 2.2% of the population, therefore leaving 51% untreated. 2.8 million, approximate number for schizophrenia, 1.1 of the population, 40% being untreated. They're leaving a lot of people untreated.
Yes.
And so that's what we run into, and those are the ones that you try to get into a facility, but they have the autonomy to walk out.
Correct. So those individuals who have the autonomy to walk out probably need other interventions. Whether that is someplace they can go to, but hell, trying to get into the county mental health to see somebody is a long line.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah.
Do they still have Edith's place?
Yes.
She does still have it?
Yes. But going to MHMRA, which is now the Harris County, just going down to Dallas to the eligibility clinic to determine if you can even get an appointment. Like, the process within itself is
to deter you. I think it's also to deter you.
It is, and so your appointment is so far out when at this present time I'm in need. So
being in line to go some other time doesn't help.
Correct.
Yeah.
Especially if I go home and then I feel okay in a few days, because what are we accustomed to doing? Need to go home and rest.
Yeah, go get some rest.
Go get some rest, and then you'll feel better. And so. While part of that is true because your mind needs to be refueled by the rest, it still does not address whatever situational or environmental triggers have gotten you to this point. And so that is the issue. So what do we end up doing? We avoid things. We won't do something.
They don't go away.
They don't go away, but we will avoid them. And if we do feel as if they are becoming a trigger, we will isolate ourselves. So when people be like, I got to take some time to myself, you've been triggered somewhere.
Now, when you have nervous breakdowns, is that a precursor to mental illness, or is that?
Depends. So depends on the age in which you have the nervous breakdown. So for those individuals who have a nervous breakdown prior to the age of 18, they are at higher risk to develop schizophrenia. And
okay.
so those are some of the precursors. Now, people who have nervous breakdowns could just be under stress. And then that needs to be either identified.
I was gonna say, how is that diagnosed? Because somebody could easily diagnose you,
Right.
Misdiagnose you rather.
Lots of people are misdiagnosed. So I think we live in a world of inclusion, though not necessarily inclusive, but it sounds good, inclusive.
Yeah, it makes it sound everybody's fair, everybody's even. Yeah.
But we all
Life isn't that way.
in labels, good, bad, or indifferent, give us a group to belong to. So when you say I'm bipolar, now I know what's wrong with me. And now I got a group I can identify with. I got a group I can be
all these labels
part
and
of.
yes. I call it a tribe. You don't necessarily need to belong to a tribe.
So then at that point, then we need to change the mindset. That you don't need the tribe of the negative stigma,
Right, that's what I'm saying.
And not that having a mental disorder makes it a negative stigma. I think society has put on
absolutely
that is a negative,
especially as it relates to minorities.
Yeah, so let's clear that up. There's nothing
Yes.
wrong with a person having this disorder, but it's the negative stigma and the connotation associated when it comes to minorities for it. So we have
it's demonized when it's minorities,
so
Black or Hispanic.
We as minorities should change the narrative, and so how do you change the narrative? Change the narrator,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I get that, right.
So if we can do that, that could help us out a lot. It's not going to be an overnight process because this is a mindset of years, generations that we have come through. But if we don't start now, then when?
Yeah, and so like I said in a previous conversation, that quite a few people or percentage of population has been left untreated.
Right.
So the consequences of that non-treatment would be 170,000 homeless people.
Yes.
With serious mental illness.
Yes. Now, I think when you think about mental illness, you have to also think about the other factors that play in it. So, drug use is a number one trigger for mental illness, and I say that because the properties that are in some of these drugs, the chemicals and all that, they trigger imbalances in the brain. So
I think they've done something. This is my opinion. I think when they created crack, I think they've got this to go with the DNA of the black man, the melanin, something having to do with our melanin or something in our DNA that would attach itself to quickly become addicted. And I don't think it became an issue until, conversely, the white people started getting hooked on crack. I mean, not until they get involved.
And now it's a huge epidemic on these opioids.
Okay. Yes.
So now we got to shut down society.
Okay. Right. Okay. And they knew when they were doing all this.
Right.
So I'm just trying to figure out why. They feed you the drugs, and then so again, I look at this, and I hate to sound cynical. I just look at all of this as a construct that has been perpetuated intentionally for the demise of minorities.
Yes, and while that is true, we hold some of the blame, and
we do. We're not the most assertive group of people, unfortunately.
And I find that ironic that you say that, because other minority groups view us as very aggressive.
Do they really?
Oh yeah, we're the angry black woman.
That's true.
We are aggressive with what we want to them.
Well, we've had to apply a certain amount. See, I didn't want to use the word aggressive, so I used the word assertive, which can be interchangeably, but a little different. But I just see us not being forthright in working for the advocacy.
Yes,
of mental illness.
I think,
and especially in our communities.
I think we have come accustomed to thinking that we are I've gotten this far, right? I don't want to do anything that's going to shake
That's
it
what
up.
I mean. That's the
Right.
lack of
So all I'm going to
aggression.
concern about is myself and my small immediate family, whether it's just my mom and maybe not even my sisters and brothers, but my mom and my kids. My sisters and brothers can do whatever they want to do, but this,
I'm handle right in
yes,
this pool.
but this what I created, my DNA out of this pool. I can be concerned with that. So what that does is take us away from the communal community that we were, and so now we have just become like white people at some point,
and that's scary.
Yeah.
That's not a compliment.
Yeah.
No capacity.
Yeah,
Okay?
it isn't, but that is,
but we wanted that. We wanted.
I was just about to say
yes,
that.
We wanted to be integrated. We wanted to be
that.
fed in
and part of integration, it has its positives and its negatives, but we cannot forget who we are as we integrate. Like you can integrate in white America and still keep an identity as a black.
But see, we don't do that. I still maintain. I've said this for years, especially almost the 5 years I've been on the air. I think we were better when we were segregated. It grew our self-confidence. We had our own financial, stability. We had, businesses, viable businesses that we supported because it was only us. The only business now, as a result from segregation, for integration coming into existence, is the fact that hairdressers and morticians.
Yeah.
Those two things have remained pretty much from the segregated times when blacks only did blacks funerals and blacks only did blacks hair. I mean, now we've kind of gotten a little bit broader and we will do some of the Caucasian hair, but those two things are about the only thing that we have left as far as business.
Right. I agree, but I tell people all the time, and I'm a product of it. Probably maybe on the tail end of the product of it, but social media, like we see what everybody wants, what everybody has, and so it has done severe damage.
I believe that. I try
to
this is
our community.
It's not by happenstance that you would say that. I'm not a big proponent for social media. I mean, everything that has these disadvantages, sure, they can give you all this glowing recommendation as to what's good about it and why it's for you. But really, in actuality, it's not.
Yeah.
And I know a certain amount of not necessarily mental illness, but trying to keep up with other people comes from watching people fake their lives on Instagram and Snapchat and.
Because we want to be seen as what society wants us to be seen as.
Society cares less about us. They don't care about us. So what would that? Why would we try to impress?
We have a desire to be that, to be what society wants us to be, and not have the label of being black. It's just not what.
I don't know how black people cannot have great pride in themselves simply because everything about us, like your natural hair, our big lips, our big butt, our big. The tan, but they don't want the plight.
What's it? I'm saying everybody wants to be the N word, but don't nobody want to be called.
Don't nobody. Right? Okay, exactly, same thing.
Right,
exactly. So I'm just not sure what it is about us not recognizing who we are. I think part of our problem comes from not recognizing. And I think on that note, guys, we'll be right back. We've got to go to break.
You're listening to the Bridge of Light Radio Network, where conversations lead to real change.
I saw the other lady the other day, and I asked her about y'all if y'all were still here.
Sophie? Evelyn,
maybe.
Okay.
Maybe I saw her like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Well, it used to be there all. It used to be here. Yeah. She works in Clearwater. Yeah. I'm still trying to get the message out. Trying to wake people up, but you can only do. Hey, like I said, I can drop the information at your feet. You can either kick it, pick it up and use it. The average person will kick it.
Yep. And you kick it because you don't want to deal with it.
You kick it because you don't want to handle it.
Yep.
And see, that poses problems for us because, again, we're not that served when it comes to, and it takes a village. The village has been destroyed.
But I think that people, and I speak from the Asian standpoint, only because my daughter goes to a Chinese immersion school. And so they fired the principal. And those Asians...
Well, they showed out, I'm sure. Who are you talking about?
Do you hear me?
Everybody does, but us.
But they referenced the black people. They said they said they think Asian people are quiet and
Unassuming
and docile.
yeah.
But you see black people, when they want something, they getting ready to say something. They're getting ready to
clown.
do
They're ready to clown.
Yeah. So in their eyes,
They say it loud.
yeah. In their eyes, they view us as a person who is not just going to sit there and let something happen.
But look at what they're talking about is incidental.
Yes.
Our stuff has been historical.
Yes, but that's nothing that they see nor that can they understand. You know.
Yeah, but before you try to emulate it, you need to get a clear understanding as to why we do it. I mean, I don't know of any other race that's been denied.
Oh, nobody.
Not disowned.
Nobody.
And
it's been here as long as
we have, and we right, and then so we have no choice but to fight.
Right, but I think they look at the progress of what we have done and how that has impacted them because they benefit from it. You know, the Hispanics benefit.
Everybody does. I'm not sure we do. But
I was talking to a friend of mine on another about education. And he was telling me that
I'm ready to come back.
Okay. Hold it there. Okay. Yeah, you remember what
Yes, I can.
I may not remember. Okay. And we are back. I'm here with Dr. Eboni Butler. She's a clinical psychologist here in Houston and in Dallas. And we're talking about, get your mind right. We're talking about July being the National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. So I wanted to make sure that we got Doctor in here to talk to you about, mental illness is affecting all of us. So it's not about any segment of the population that's immune to it. So it's all of us. So we wanted to get Dr. Eboni Butler in here to kind of talk to us about mental illness. So we were just talking about something off air. Do you remember what it was? Okay, but we were talking. Again, we'll just get back to where we were. But there's so much to be said about mental illness. Is there any way that, outside of homeless people, you also have 383,000 inmates with mental illness in jail. And as I said when I did my opening, again, a lot of them just are routed.
Okay. Let's talk about that. So before doing private practice, I worked for UTMB, so I worked at Jester, and then I worked.
That's the female.
No, Jester is the inpatient.
Okay.
The inpatient unit for TDC.
Okay.
After I moved from Jester, I moved to become the clinic manager for 3 outpatient clinics. So Darrington, which is in Rosharon, the Scott unit, which is like in Angleton, and then the Clemens, which is in Brazoria, which is like by Lake Jackson, right? So those 3 units straight down 288. I'll take you right there. And what you see in the penitentiary is while there is some mental health that exists, a lot of it is inflated.
Oh, okay. Really?
Mental health. I hate
exacerbated by what? The system or the people themselves?
The people themselves that want off the cell block.
Okay, that's
want to get.
So I'm crazy. Get me out of here.
Yeah, want a drop in medical because there's no air conditioners on the unit, and so I can be in here where there's AC. Or I have an issue with another inmate, I'm going to scream, I'm suicidal. They have to do something.
So a lot of drama goes on in the prison.
It's a lot of drama. So I don't know how accurate the numbers
would be for
and
the
I can only speak for the units that I have been at as it relates to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. So while there are some that are severe, so when I was at Jester, we had a guy who gouged out both of his eyeballs.
His own?
And ate them.
Oh.
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes. On the unit and ate them. I also worked with the guy who, I don't know if y'all remember, but let's say.
Why wasn't he in one of those jackets, straight jacket? Why would they give him exposure to himself, his hands, to be able to do anything if he was able to?
That's a very good question. That is a good question. But gouged out both of his eyeballs.
And ate them.
Yep. But they cannot it is almost an act of Congress to put somebody in seclusion and in restraints.
Is it?
It is
Is
paperwork
court-
galore. It is, you have to have justifications for it, and a lot of times, they don't want to do the work. The major doesn't want to do it. The lieutenant doesn't want to do it. It requires somebody to have to sit with the person 24 hours, 7 days a week, or however long they are on the isolation seclusion, which takes another man off the board. When you're already short staffed, if you pull another officer to sit with one officer, then who's going to help you?
Too much, right?
Yeah. So there's a shortage of staff. Because turnover rate is
I would
high.
imagine.
And so sometimes it is just easier not to do it. And
so that's what they resort to.
Sometimes they take that stance on not to do it. Now there are times that depends on if you have a warden that is pro mental health. Sometimes you get on some of the units and the warden thinks that medical is a flop. Like they don't support medical. For one, medical is not bound by TCJ, so the warden can't sit here and dictate what you do because UTB controls medical. So you have that battle. Then you got some people who just are behind the times and don't believe that mental health is a big issue or that people need help. Yeah, it's a very depressing state of mind and institution when you walk into the penitentiary.
How do you do it?
I did it for a long time, not even thinking about it. Girl, 8-9 months pregnant, walking the floor. I just, you got to be able to turn it.
It's your mission.
Yeah, and I think
we all have a ministry.
We all have that, and so that was for me okay. And then knowing that in medical there weren't that many that looked like me, but
that's
the prison looked like me.
Oh, absolutely, the prison looks like,
So because of that, you found a lot of inmates that a lot of people just needed to talk.
I was just going to ask you
to debrief whatever goes on for the day.
Okay, I was just going to ask you if in fact they have, because you diagnose.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things, with your diagnosis, do you work with the court systems or anything like that? Tell us about that.
So the work that I do primarily is CPS work. I do some forensic cases when it comes to competency to stand trial. So that's when the criminal justice system comes in and they will contact me to determine or do an evaluation to determine if somebody is competent to stand trial. And that means if they have the mental capacity to stand in their own defense, right? Insanity at the time of defense is something that Texas really does not touch. So when they say they have to do a forensic evaluation on somebody, it is a level of competency. And that goes in cycles, whether it's 90 days, 60 days, whether it's sustained, just kind of depending on the severity and the level of the case. So what I see when I see people who come from the criminal justice system or are in the penitentiary, there are a lot of people who just need an outlet,
just somebody to talk to.
Just somebody to talk to. Don't necessarily deny what they have done, because there are a lot of innocent people in jail. There are a lot of people who actually did some things that are in jail. So it's not that they're ever trying to justify their behaviors, but everybody has a story as to why they did it. And so I don't think people get the why. They just see what the result of was the why, but never want to hear the backstory, because we feel as if people make their own decisions, which they do, but a lot of times decisions are influenced by circumstances, by generational curses, by just environments, and so a lot of times people fall victim to that. Intentions are good, people want to do good things, but that moment that you thought twice when you should have went with your right mind
and follow your first mind, and now look at where you are. Now, do they have group therapies like I know you also do?
Yes.
Do they have those in prison where they're able to just talk?
They do.
They're not violent. They're just.
They do have group. They do have. So UTMB does offer group therapy sessions. And it's like a sign-in list. So you have to get laid in meaning that they give you a number for the day and be like, hey, you can come to medical at 9 for group. So it depends on circumstances. It also depends on your charge. So if you have a violent charge, your charge could disqualify you from groups. Your record, behavior record in the penitentiary can disqualify you from groups. What that says is the people who are acting out because of the situations, they're not in the groups.
Okay. Yeah.
So you have resources, you have opportunities for them to acquire skills, but now you got the Jim Crow rules of the penitentiary.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
You can't do that, so therefore you don't qualify for the group. And I think that is the population that is under the radar and that needs to be addressed. And I think that is an institutional thing that the state of Texas will have to address.
Mm-hmm. Real quickly before we have to go, question about funding or advocacy or monies to accommodate these people, because I know even from my friends' experience that medications
are through the roof.
Ooh, I think one set of her meds was $700, something like that.
And so when you think about medications, you have to think about, so there's a formulary list that you're supposed to go by. The thing is that with medications, you have to be compliant. And sometimes you have to be compliant for 60 days in order for it to be in your system to determine if it is going to work. A lot of people don't want to work through the side effects. So what they do is say, I don't like this medication is not working. So he's giving you the formulary, which is a decent price. And then once you say this medication doesn't work, now I move to a non-formulary, which now makes the medication price increase.
Yeah. Wow.
And so for those individuals, I would say those individuals who are on medications, you have to work through them. And I think that is where the barrier is. They don't want to give the medication a chance. I take the medication for a week. I start to feel better. I don't take it anymore.
Yeah, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, or there's nasty side effects. I don't like how the side effects work. Find me another medication.
So you're just going through.
And then you're just going through. But then you also have people who have comorbid illnesses that some of the medications will contraindicate when it comes to their liver enzymes, when it comes to their kidney functions, when it comes to your statins, your cholesterol medications. There's some medications are not going to go. So some of the medications that you need that may not impact the medical needed medications that you're on are not on the formulary list. They are on the other medications.
It's like big games. It's one big, dog chasing his tail. Okay, now with that, we have to get ready to, I guess, get off air. But Doctor, I do want you to give the listeners your information.
Okay.
How to get in touch with you. Like I said, this is nothing to be ashamed of. We all
absolutely
need it at some time. And so, well, real quick, are we able to get our mind right? Are we able to not go mental?
Yes.
And give us your information.
I think we are. It just takes some inner work, and it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some self-awareness and reflection, which is, hard for a lot of people.
People don't want to go in.
People don't want to go inward. We don't want to deal with those raw emotions. We'd rather just ignore it because I feel good now.
I'm good. Yeah.
And I can just move through. But eventually it's going to catch up, And so I think if you do the work on the front end, you can reap the benefits on the back end.
And get your mind right in so many words. Well, Doctor, give us all of your information.
Yes.
How to reach you, where your offices are in Dallas.
My office is located at the corner of 59 and West Park. For those people who take public transportation, it's across the street from the Hillcroft Transit Center. I'm located on the 3rd floor in Suite 310. My office number is 832-386-9449. Again, that number is 832-386-9449.
Doctor, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. This is our show, Psychologist. We will always bring her in when we need to have professional information as regards to dealing with psychology and
Alright.
all of that. So thank you for coming.
Thank
We'll
you.
have you in again,
Okay.
depending on what the topic is. But until next Wednesday, guys, I guess we'll see you again on the radio.
All right. So what I was
You're a natural
saying.
on the radio.